And we are live. I am the Lunatic Libertarian. This is a very special late night edition of the Lunatic Libertarian podcast, coming to you live on Facebook and YouTube. And we are going to talk about the term statist. A statist is an advocate of a political system in which the state has substantial centralized control over social and economic affairs. So, what is a statist? I could pretty much claim that anybody is a statist, no matter if they're talking to me about any kind of system in which a centralized government or a form of control is being used. One of the reasons that I absolutely hate labels, titles, and categories is because it narrows you into a certain mind projected state in which this is the category that you are supposed to fit, or the demographic, or the image, or whatever it is. It's the 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 social construct that allows me to understand who you are, as far as the imagery that has been programmed into my mind. Now, when you talk about being a statist, if somebody wants to talk about a centralized currency system, like the Federal Reserve or anything, I can say you were a statist. Or if you believe in any laws against the individual, you are a statist because you believe that someone else has the right to impose themselves on you for the quote unquote greater good. We've seen this over the past couple years with the Irish regime that's been going on. We've seen where that's got us, but we can go all the way back to any kind of social construct that humans interact with each other and say that we are going to be here for a mutual benefit. Now, when it comes to a greed or any kind of substantial human want above what it actually takes to survive, you can be called greedy. And if you're a statist that says that your greed is better than, or is more important than, the greed of another, or the want of another, yet again, we're talking about systems here, and being a statist. They kind of coincide. The left, the right, the center, we all operate within the system called the United States of America. Uh, Everybody wants to be correct. No, and or everybody wants to be right, but nobody wants to be correct. And the language that's involved in these kind of scenarios is always going to be putting another individual against another individual, while the state sits up top and just says, "Yeah, we're pulling all the strings here." Um, Now, when we talk about silencing voices on any kind of social media platforms or anything like that, I view these platforms as a public utility. Nobody's using a telephone really anymore that's connected to the wall. I still remember the rotary dial telephones, push button telephones, first gen cell phones that could get a signal anywhere in the country. Um, when you try and silence communication, there's obviously agenda behind it. Now, we can block people, we can silence statements. Um, a lot of people don't even know how to interpret the human written language anymore anyway, because they don't understand punctuation or anything like that. And this is where social media has perverted things, along with enhancements from the state, from the federal government, from the state governments, with their political actors that are posting stuff on social media. And we can run around multiples of these individuals and see the circle jerk that we're getting, and nothing is actually getting accomplished. Um, when we look at the individual, and if the individual is against status, or people that want centralized systems to impose themselves, whether it be economically or politically, you're a statist. So any argument that comes out of that, you're a statist. Well, I believe that taxes are well, I don't believe in centralized currency. I don't believe in money. I believe in skill sets that produce an actual outcome from human beings. I don't believe in the currency system as it is, or any kind of money in exchange for goods and services, because I can exchange my actual labor for your own individual personal benefit versus buying your services for an exchange of fiat currency that has actually zero backing. Um, and this all goes back to the institution of the Federal Reserve System, all the way forward to where we are now. I actually got a person that just popped into the live stream right here. He's running for sheriff. I can't remember which county it is, but I know he's running for sheriff here in Wisconsin. We're going to bring him up on the stream. His name is Scott Noble.
Hello,
Scott, how
there.
you doing?
Good, good. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. Scott, what county are you running for sheriff in?
It's Portage County. It's the exact center of the state, just about. I think the exact town that is actually in Wood County, Pittsville, but we're just a little over from there. Most people know Stevens Point. Stevens Point is right there in Portage County.
Yeah, you take Highway 10 right across from Calumet County, we can hit right into Stevens Point.
Yeah. In fact, I live in a little town that's kind of a suburb there. You might not have heard of it. It's called Junction City.
Oh.
Yeah, so
I'm talking about statism and statist, Scott. So I brought up the actual definition: an advocate of a political system in which the state has substantial centralized control over social and economic affairs. And that is the technical definition of a statist. What do you think of statist?
well, that's actually what's been, I guess, what I've been talking about just since I got into this race. Most people are asking me, "Can you really do that? I mean, are you really able to, take a mandate edict from, say, the state or federal government and nullify or, um, you know, um, basically stop it at the border of the county?" And that is something that a county sheriff can do. And part of the purpose of my campaign is to show other counties, the other 71 counties in Wisconsin, that you can do that. That you can, like, for example, this mask mandate. That was the first time you actually saw some counties had their sheriff actually say, "Oh, no, we're not going to follow that." And we've never really had that. I mean, I can't remember the last time that county sheriffs are actually telling the state they're not going to follow the governor's orders.
Now, do you think that that all boils down to counties receiving monies from tax revenue that comes down from the state, depending on what, if it's medical or if it's housing or if it's, depending on what avenue that money is going to go to?
Yeah, like in Wisconsin, a lot of it's run by alcohol revenue. That's one of the reasons. Well, for example, we have the drinking age is 21 years old. The federal government has told the state
Scott, you froze up. All right, while we wait for Scott to come back, we'll. All right. You back, Scott?
Yeah, I just had a little blip in the internet, but I think I'm all right. Anyway, where we were going with that is a lot of the threats from the higher levels of government have to do with taxes and state and federal funding for programs, and basically they enslave us by. I mean, there's this old adage. See, I used to be on the city council, and one of the main arguments for not taking grant money or federal or state money was that if we didn't take it, somebody else would. And that's sort of always the argument. But the thing that they don't talk about is that a lot of times state funding and federal funding and even grants is only for a short period of time. And then once you implement it, then it's your baby. And then you have to take it from there, which means you have to continue to staff and to maintain and to build and do all kinds of things that people don't think about until after the money runs out.
Well, usually those programs are just startup programs. It's not like you're actually being allocated funds on an annual basis, unless it's contracted through legislation for 6 years or 5 years or whatever it is. And even grants can be allocated for more than just a year or whatever, or just a one lump sum. Um, do you think that an individual that challenges the state, regardless of who that individual is, do you think that the state has the right to impose themselves? Because we obviously have laws and legislation and all this other stuff, but I definitely come from a background where people circumvent laws and legislations so that that it's for their own benefit, and they're just gonna wrap them, take a little right turn around those barricades in their lives. Do you think that somebody should be put in jail or have time restricted off of their freedom because they're circumventing the state, as we've seen multiple actors in the state circumvent certain laws so they benefit and so forth and so on?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing that happens. It's happened a lot in the last 2 years. I mean, just about everything that comes down from on high. Lately, it seems like people are more in the mood to push back, and that's the first time I've ever seen that. Because as far as the way I've seen it over the last years that I've been around, there's always been a lot of protectionism. I mean, there's always people getting pushed out um, for not complying, and even the smallest little things. I just what comes to mind is have you heard of Wausau? That's north of Point. Um, there is was a kid up there, and he had a little bike, and he had like a refrigerator on the back, or no, a freezer on the back, and he was going to sell ice cream and run around on his bike, and he had this little like battery that goes to the freezer and stuff. And they were telling him he needed a permit for it, and it turns out the kid's dad was an attorney, and he sued him, and that one got kind of pushed away. And but see, this is the kind of thing that happens all the time. Um, you don't have the permit to do anything anymore because most of the time, well, I don't know exactly where you live, but where I live is kind of a suburb, an area where people are just supposed to live, kind of like a retirement community. And there's a few bars and churches and that, but a lot of those towns, they don't want to develop. They don't want to, you know, um, have people come in and things like that. So a lot of what you're talking about, the force of government is a way to kind of keep development down because they don't want people coming in. They don't want foot traffic. You ever hear the term NIMBY? Not in my backyard. I mean, that's kind of what happens with the force of law.
In my opinion, I think that it all depends on what people are willing to subvert themselves to. How much are they going to be subservient to a guidance or groupthink that allows them to interact in society? Now, my personal belief is that I don't need to interact in society unless I volunteer to. Whether that's going to my local grocery store or my local corner market or whatever. And I really don't think that I should have to provide fiat currency in order to retain goods and services if I can provide labor to obtain goods and services as long as there's a need for it. Well, obviously, you build your network around what services and goods you can obtain. So it creates a system in itself. Do you think that the government has the overall monopoly on violence in the current state that we have here in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, we're finding that. I mean, it's just become more and more. difficult to take care of yourself. I mean, it seems like we're so dependent on so many other entities. Um, I mean, you look at like with food shortages and gas and different products like baby formula and toilet paper and stuff like that. I mean, it's just kind of like we're so dependent on somebody else that all of a sudden they're like, wait, what do we do? We don't have any baby formula. We don't have any toilet paper. And in towns like, well, there's a town I grew up in called Marshfield, and you might have heard of Marshall, Wisconsin, but they all went down to some people have a little extra money, a little more money than maybe some other communities, and they just went and cleaned out the entire aisle of all the towels, paper towels and toiletries and all the stuff that they thought was going to go away. They just cleaned it out and hoarded it. And I mean, I walked through that. I couldn't believe that they had the shelves were completely bare. Um, I don't know how you feel about it, but I can kind of see where things could get really bad really quick. And I guess that's probably my main reason for wanting to get involved in being a sheriff. I've been in politics a long way, but I've never really gone further than alderman. I was actually nominated for state senate like about 10 years ago, but um, I I wanted to try to do, especially working with the Libertarian Party. There's been a shift with the management at the top that wants to really get into local. In fact, I just talked with the LP National, and they're like, "Hey, we're looking at your Twitter page and put some stuff up about your sheriff race, and we'll retweet it because we want to make sure people know that they can do things like nullify to have a nullification at the county level." Um, One of the things we're doing in the Portage County area is the Stevens Point City Council actually decriminalized 25 grams of cannabis. If you get caught with it and it's your first offense, you pay a $5 fine. And then they're probably not even going to do that because, there was a referendum in 2018 and it got 83% for legalization. So that's another one of my campaign points is I want to expand it to the county. I want to basically decriminalize cannabis at the borders of the county
Oh,
for
okay.
medication and recreation, whatever.
Well, decriminalization just means that I can grow a plant that comes from nature. Going back to the question you asked me, whether toiletries or any of that stuff, none of that stuff is relevant to me. I rarely use paper products. I'm trying to get off of toilet paper in general, just for the simple fact that you can reuse washable cloths and stuff like that, and we don't have the manual machines anymore. You just drop everything into the wash machine, push a button. That modern convenience handles sanitary issues, and depending on what cleansers you use, or if you use natural cleansers, will get rid of bacteria and stuff like that. I have raised all my children in cloth diapers. And as far as baby formula, there's ways to supplement for breast milk. And as far as baby food or any of that stuff, I actually made all my own baby food because I could spend 99 cents on a 1 pound sweet potato, cook it, mash it up, and store it for my child to eat for a week. None of that stuff has ever applied as far as my rearing children or being a responsible adult. I think that's just modern convenience that becomes a control factor because people become complacent with those things. It's the same thing with gasoline or anything like that. You still have your two legs. I mean, people used to bike miles and miles to get to their destination. It's just the modern convenience and the factor that, well, I don't have to work as hard anymore. So now I'm going to sit back and be like, well, the government regulates this stuff, but it really is irrelevant when you actually want to get back to survival tactics. I mean, I know people that used to walk 4 or 5 miles to just get water every single day. So this stuff is just the American dream of modern convenience, and that's another reason that we have a lot of the situations that we have in this country because people don't really know how to survive without those modern conveniences. So when toilet paper was going away in the supermarkets, I really didn't give a shit. When all that other stuff was going away, people were hoarding it. I didn't give a shit. I don't eat box cereals or box foods or any of that stuff because it's a modern convenience that came out of World War II and World War One that said that, well, if we could have these dehydrogenized foods, but yet again, you're eating a bunch of chemicals that you don't even know how to pronounce half the ingredients. I'm a very pragmatic man. It's just that, well, if I wanted to, I could go out in my backyard and hit a turkey and have a meal for a few days, but that's eating very moderately, maybe a couple ounces of protein a day. And then, depending on how much work you put into or you have calorie consumption, depends on how much nutrition you will actually need. Now, do you consume water? Do you consume coffee? Do you consume, you know, soda drinks or stuff like that? Yet again, all that stuff can go to the wayside. As long as I have a good water source, I'll be fine. A lot of people have bought into this modern society, and then they demand it as a need when it's really a want. I mean, do you need electricity? Not really. There's a lot of people that still survive without it. Do you need gasoline? Not really. There's a lot of people that survive without it. It's just dependent on how much modern convenience you want to be subservient to. And when you can eliminate all that and really just, even if you had a temporary shelter for a couple days, move on to the next, move on to the next. You don't even really need a foundation center point, which has become a part of the modern tradition of the American family. So, I mean, my thought process on all this stuff is probably a lot different than yours. But I mean, you asked me the question, so I'm responding.
No, I'm good with all that. I mean, that's actually kind of what I think people are going to have to do. I mean, they're going to have to probably get back to like doing their own gardening and some of the not be so dependent on having to go to the store. I'm seeing more of that. I mean, um, I just I think sometimes we don't think that the thing can stop. That maybe you're going to have to actually, like you said, shoot your own turkey or go pick your own apples or whatever. I mean, um, people are dependent on other people, and I think as libertarians we're pretty self-reliant. We all kind of got a place to go and a plan to take care of ourselves and our family, and that's probably how we're kind of different than a lot of the general public. I mean, we're some of our ideas are coming to the forefront now because of how it's been the last 2 years. People are starting to think a little different because they didn't realize that they would go to the store and all the shelves would be empty. Or I
Well, I
don't know
mean,
about.
it just depends on how much you're willing to sacrifice, you know. I mean, it even comes to, modern child birthing versus what women had to go through 100 years ago, and the techniques that are used nowadays for modern convenience. Well, my doctor says that he's got a golf outing at 5 p.m. We're going to schedule my C-section at 1 to make sure that I can get in and out so that he can still meet his golf outing versus the natural route, which could have dire consequences. I'm not saying that it cannot, but the thing is that modern convenience and the ability to, let's say, sell life or the extension of life has given the power to other individuals over other individuals. I mean, it's lack of choice. I mean, when my wife and I decided that we were going to have natural childbirths, we were bombarded with individuals trying to tell us that we were loons and stuff like that, or not vaccinating our children. You know, you guys are crazy. And actually, if you look at the paperwork that the state gives you to decline actual vaccinations, there's a little thing that says that you can be charged with child neglect because you are going against modern medical advice. And I've talked to some academics. I think a lot of academics are, full of hot air because they've been listening to their own voice so long that they don't know reality from a hole in the ground. So these are things that I don't entrench myself or have some kind of attachment to say that I'm going to be subservient to academia or I'm going to be subservient to this or that because these systems really don't apply to my everyday life.
Well, I'm with you there. I mean, I guess I'm an academic in some respects. I mean, I've been through all the colleges and all that kind of stuff. I mean, a teacher, I have to listen to that. But I'll tell you, there has been a lot of changes because one of the things is we don't really know much or have much agreement at the top of the world of psychology, which actually runs education. And it seems like every couple of years they change all the terms and they change all the, I guess, ways of identifying the same problems from before. And a lot of times it's the same things over and over and over. They just give them a new name. And in fact, I got contacted by a professor today because there's been a lot of controversy going on at Stevens Point right now because they're actually letting out a sex offender. And this person was, I guess, in prison since I think like 2012 or something like that. He had sexually assaulted some teenage girls, and very concerning because they said he was going to be just discharged. He refused the housing that they were going to provide for him, so he's just going to get discharged to the street to just roam around. And so there's all this uproar about it, and I just said, well, this is one of those cases where, you know, the county sheriff has to be involved because, we're trying to, make it so that places are safe, but we don't want to take anybody's rights away either. I mean, there's this difficult balancing act. So actually, one of the professors from the university wrote to me and said, she says, "Hey, I'm a fellow sociologist just like you, and I struggle with this whole thing. Like, I've read your platform and that you want to get away from incarceration and into rehabilitation, but what do we do about this guy? Do we want to keep him locked up?" And I wasn't advocating for keeping him locked up. I was saying he had to go to an address. You can't just have somebody roaming around the street that's a known pedophile. I mean, see, we have all these, I guess, problems that we're doing. It's almost like I'm always trying to find the libertarian answer for this, but it seems like we're just dumping people out into the street and just waiting for something to happen so we can throw them back in. And
I would say that being a product of being labeled a felon and being in the criminal justice system and stuff like that, I would say that there's a two-part scenario to this. First, I think the sheriff is the last point of security. The individual needs to be secure in their own skill sets, their own abilities to defend themselves, and maybe a three-part facet. The state should not implement barricades to which an individual cannot defend themselves. Now, when it comes to dumping people on the street, the first thing I would say is that a lot of criminals are because of barricades implemented by public policy. Now, those barricades are for an agenda. Now, I was smart enough to know that I needed to move out of whatever county that I had charges in into a new county, because then my probation would change, and then there is no preemptive or labeling of my name, because then I've been shuffled through the paperwork. And there's no attention on me because it's just another name in the system. Now, if I were to stay in the county in which that I was originally charged or had a conviction in, then the sheriff's department or individual police cities or townships or anything could get to know me, and then, well, that's an easy target because the paperwork's pretty fucking easy. And then it sets into perpetual motion. Now, coming from Milwaukee, where people are, incarcerated and released within 24 hours, and it really doesn't even depend on the charges, unless it's murder or manslaughter or vehicular homicide, you can be released within 24 hours just as long as it's a weekday. The problem that I have with that system is that it is designed to make sure that you can have repeat offenders to keep your system going. I don't know of many one-off offenders that stay in the system. That's why they're one-off offenders.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's been a couple cases like this. This one was more extreme case, because of the, fact that there's sexual assaults of children and that kind of thing. But there was a patient from the local hospital there. I think it was in Stevens Point. I think it might have been the Aspirus Hospital. But anyway, they discharged a gentleman with dementia. And he was from Wausau, which is, a half hour away up the highway. And he was just left out onto the street to just sort of wander around. And people were reporting it like, hey, there's this confused gentleman out there, and he's got no home, and he's probably got dementia or something, and they called it in. The police just said, just keep letting them walk around. So I guess what I'm saying is that there's sort of this dump off mentality. I mean, we wouldn't even do this to dogs or cats, but we do it to veterans. We do it to people that are our extended families. They've worked in our community organizations and our churches, and volunteered in the Boys and Girls Club and all these kinds of things. But yet all of a sudden something goes wrong with their mental health or AODA or maybe a homeless situation. And all of a sudden we're sort of dropping the ball, where it's like we push them back out into a situation where they're destined to fail so that they can go back into the system, and then, we're protected again.
Well, I mean, the system has degraded households, has separated the man from the woman, whether there's, multiple men in prison, their children are raised by the state in a form of public education and daycare, and everything's provided by the state. And then there's this perpetual motion of, yeah, they come out and then, well, I'm not going to live on, these wages or this minimal amount of food or anything like this. And then I'm going to go in and try and circumvent the system by performing quote unquote illegal activities, and then get arrested. It happens all over again. I think that if the state would not be detrimental to the family first, maybe we wouldn't have so many problems. Maybe if people had time on their hands to take care of their loved ones and not succumb to the state, maybe we wouldn't have as many people out on the street. Or you do have certain individuals that don't have family and stuff like that. But usually there's volunteers or other organizations that donate their time for those individuals, whether it be group homes that are publicly funded, or privately funded by donation. Publicly funded homes usually are shitholes that only take the money to maintain the property and not the people that are actually on board, depending if they're there for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, or whatever. And being a veteran myself, I've seen that, going to a place off of 33rd and State in Wisconsin to try and get temporary housing. So, and we were eating expired ice creams and all this other stuff. So, I have personal experience in all the stuff that you're talking about, and that's probably why I don't really agree. I think the very first point that I make is that the state creates the barricades in which the public policy states what is law, that you can go out and have, do whatever you want until you reach this point. And then that barricade implements the state into your life because somebody does not have their own personal security. And then public policy becomes, well, we're going to make people secure because we're going to create this law. I think this is a mindset that needs to change on a human level, because no matter what, you're going to have people that may have a screw loose. I think everybody has a screw loose, depending on what their situation and their timeline that they have and their experience in their life detail. I don't think anybody should be absolutely detrimented to where they can't survive, but yet we barricade people away from real avenues because we have to channel them through this system. And decentralized systems actually, I think, have been the complete collapse right now of the United States.
Well, yeah, I mean that's one of the biggest things that I heard when I went around collecting signatures, was they're talking about the families. And I think there's an outcry for keeping families together, close knit, and strong, because the breakup of the family as a result of these things that you're mentioning actually causes more problems, not for just that person, but the whole nuclear surrounding. I mean, everybody involved with that person, that family member, is affected. If they're in foster care or a group home. I taught in a group home. I taught in an alternative school. I've taught in the inner city schools. I know about I got the crap kicked out of me by a student. I mean, I'm literally going to get ankle surgery. I mean, part of this campaign, I'm probably going to be on crutches because I got whacked by a kid. And a lot of things have just kind of pegged the needles, gone way up. on all kinds of things going on over the last 2 years. I mean, everything is up, you know, crime and just, I mean, that's, I think, why a lot of us are talking about all these things, because just everything's pegged. It's just, we're kind of like on the edge of just like chaos right now. And I think libertarians are kind of drawn to it because they think, hey, well, we got the answers. We can come here now and tell you what to do now and say, hey, I mean, not really tell people what to do, but tell you, a way to deal with this kind of thing. And so, I mean, maybe that's the rise of the libertarian is, um, I think that's kind of why the structure of the national party kind of changed, because there was a lot of feeling in the party that the libertarians didn't do enough. They didn't say enough when all this stuff happened. They could have shined a lot more than they did. The first time people had their businesses closed and the schools closed and were forced to get vaccinations and masks and all these things, and they were just like shocked about all of it. I think a lot of people in the Libertarian Party said, hey, we should have been coming out real strong on that. We missed a huge opportunity to show everybody that we're not lunatics, with all due respect. We really actually are the middle. We're the more sane of the, I guess, political philosophies when you really look at what we're about. So I guess I'm hopeful about that thing. That really is probably, I know there was some resistance to some of the management changes at the top level, but really I think that's what it's a lot about. Is in the past we just haven't seized the opportunity to really look good. And I think we're going to start doing that now. Hopefully it's not too late.
I think that a lot of libertarians throughout the regime of the last 2 years of the virus, I would say that a lot of libertarians actually struck themselves outside of the social norms in which they were hiding in. As far as business being shut down, that's an individual choice you're going to take to let the government tell you whether you're going to shut down your business. Either you're going to continue to perform business and then you can fight your state in court, or you're going to voluntarily close down because the state tells you to. And these are just my personal opinions, but as far as jobs telling you that you have to mandate certain things, you can mandate anything that you want. That doesn't mean that I'm actually going to do it. It's the same thing with laws. You can write any law that you want. That doesn't mean I'm going to do that. And that stuff is practiced 24/7, 365. Doesn't matter where you live, what state you're in, or what country you're in. It happens all over the globe where people are not going to be dictated to about how they're going to live their lives. Now, you can be labeled as a criminal. You can be labeled as a sovereign citizen. You can be labeled as a do-gooder or a person that is a law-abiding citizen, and all these things. It all depends on personal choice. For me, if a company was going to mandate the vaccination, I would literally walk up to the boss and say, "Have a nice day. I'm out of here. Go fuck yourself." I'm not that individual that's going to sit here and have other people dictate to me, and that's just because I've lived that life and I'm beyond it. I'm not going to have individuals say, "Well, you can't do this or you can't do that." Now, there's blatant things that you're going to say. Are you going to smoke in a restaurant when you're not I'm going to be polite and not do that because I can respect other human beings. If you want me to wear a shirt in the store, sure. My shirt could be a small V string, whatever. I'm wearing a shirt. Depends on interpretation whether you consider that a shirt or not. But yet again, these implementations are under the guise of public health. No shoes, no shirt, no service. But you can walk in with flip flops on, your toes exposed, and all this other crap. And this is just basically boiling down to the semantics. What I'm saying is, an individual who has the gumption within themselves, now we can fight the state, or we can just live our lives. Now the state can try and impose themselves on you, but then you can make a spectacle of it to where the state can be shown to be an ass. Now, I understand that murder's wrong, theft is wrong, stuff like that is absolutely wrong because you're doing violence to other individuals. As far as any of that stuff, as far as mandates and stuff like that, that goes down to your personal choice whether you're going to have stuff dictated to you. Now, my personal experience, I have a felony for failure to comply with an officer, and I have a misdemeanor for failure to comply with an officer. I do not care. You can show up in a suit with a badge, You can have your title or whatever you think makes you a higher individual human being. These things do not matter to me as an individual. So, I mean, this is where, you can label me an anarchist or stuff like that, but I'm a human being that's not going to have life dictated to me. As a sheriff, which I think is a constitutional thing, that you're there to protect people's individual human rights, their unalienable rights, I don't think any of this stuff has anything to do with that. As long as the state is not preventing anything, because they're not going to prevent anything, if they can have some kind of like prosecutorial state where if you kill somebody, there's a consequence. If you rob somebody, there's a consequence. If you assault somebody violently, there is a consequence. I'm not opposed to that. I'm opposed to people coming in and say, well, you can't walk across the street this way. You can't run this little ice cream stand because of this. These are just ridiculous notions where people have a false sense of security because of the state.
Yeah. The part that we really haven't touched on though is I don't know how much business or whatnot you've done. I mean, you're into like you work as a diesel mechanic. Okay, so one of the things, you know, I had a business in that at one time. Actually, that was probably some of the toughest work I ever did was being in the car business, fixing cars, and running a wrecker and doing body work and ripping out motors and transmissions and exhausts and all that kind of stuff. So I have a lot of respect for what you do. But one of the things people don't realize, some areas are kind of lobbied a little bit. Like I know you talked a little in the past to some other guests about what license you'd have to do what you have to do and that kind of thing. Well, really, in the auto business, there's really not a lot of real structure there. I mean, you can literally have a guy work on something and he doesn't have any certification to do anything, and he can still rip out a motor. But that's not true all the way across the board. I mean, some areas have really next to nothing. Like construction companies, you don't really need a license to be a construction company. I mean, to build a house, you almost need like nothing. I mean, so these are areas that are lobbied to not have to have certification really or have any kind of training. If you know how to do it, well, it'll show up when you get the house done. But it, the point I'm making is that in some other areas, it's absolutely insane. Like hair braiding and hair cutting and food and liquor and tobacco and vaping and all these things. Um, I'll give you a good example of this. You know how have you ever been to a Quick Trip? You walk in and you can buy a piece of pizza and you can eat it, right? You can eat it right in the store. You can sit down at the little table by the window and you can eat a piece of pizza that's hot. Do you know what you have to do to get that license from the county? Let's say you have a store. Like I have a liquor store, but they closed it down. But anyway, I was asking about having a store where I have pizza and have it eaten just like you do at Quick Trip. And the county health department told me that you need to do $1 million a year in sales to get that license. So in other words, the lobbyists, these Quick Trip lobbyists, made it impossible for about 99% of the public to do that. I mean, you got to either be a big grocery store, like you got to be Festival Foods or whatever, and you can do it. So that's how you go into a Quick Trip or a festival or whatever and can eat pizza right in the store because they do more than $1 million. But that eliminates the other lower 99% because none of them do $1 million a year. So therefore, they can't serve hot food in their store. They have to have a commercial kitchen license and do it like a restaurant. That's just one example of how things are set up against the little guy, the mom and pop.
But that's only if you want to run your store within the confines of the system or the state. Now, how many drug dealers do you know that run their store within the confines of the state? How many have a international trade license for the product that they sell? I mean, this goes into what I mean by it's up to your own individual choice what lifestyle you're going to live. Now, to be a law-abiding citizen, you would go and apply for the proper licensing and yada yada yada. I can tell you that there's probably thousands of people that run restaurants without any kind of licensing or coding any whatsoever. I can tell you there's probably people in Wisconsin that grow products that they sell at their corner market. They're still selling that product, but it's not under a regulation because it's their local stand, and it's on the it's on the honor system where somebody's going to come and drop some money into a box and they pick the produce and leave or whatever they're selling. I think that buying into the idea of this system has been a detriment to a lot of people. Now, as far as business is concerned, like I said, fiat currency, money exchanged. I mean, yeah, that's commerce, that's business. Let's say that 2 years from now, none of that exists anymore. How many people are going to survive? I don't know. How many people have the skill sets in order to do things, to be producers and not just consumers?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Well, how I don't know. Do you travel much around the country, or do you get around? Because if you do go, like, say, to like out west or down south, one of the things you see is they can't get people to work anymore. I mean, literally, I mean, you walk up to almost any restaurant, like in some of these big cities down south and out west and stuff. It's like a sign on the door. Sorry for the inconvenience, but we're going to have to close today because we're having staffing issues. Or this drive-through is the only way you can get the food because we don't have anybody inside. And you can actually make like $18 an hour being what they used to call a burger flipper. So I mean, have you noticed we don't talk about minimum wage anymore? There's no such thing. I mean, we're so far ahead of $7.35 or whatever that isn't even an issue anymore. So we don't even talk about it. So I mean,
Well, as a skilled tradesman, when people bring up minimum wage, I say that's excellent. Pay everybody $15 an hour that have no skills, because I know what I'm going to make. I'm going to make $150 an hour with my skill set. When you pay everybody at that standard, now the controlling of money markets and stuff like that, I think the hourly rate for working on a heavy diesel truck should be around $500 to $600 an hour. But because the idea that you can keep the worker at a certain wage standard and then still keep your hourly rate low to where you can have a customer base come in, that's still not paying for the millions of dollars of tooling that you have to do to keep the name on your building. But yet again, nothing actually happens in real dollars and cents anymore. They're just ones and zeros running across a screen, and then you have a PO system where one bank says to another, yes, this credit is good, this account, yep, and it's just one after another. Nothing actually happens where there's checks and cash exchanging hands for actual goods and services. As far as that's concerned, everything's on either a 90-day, 60-day, or 30-day credit system. And when people talk about social credit system, we're 90% there, especially in commerce and business.
but yeah, it's a cashless society. I mean, that's perfect for the Federal Reserve. I mean, you don't even have to print it anymore. All you got to do is hold the zero button down. So yeah, we're in a sorry shape with that. That's another thing that I think probably as a move for the libertarians going forward is, I don't know what happened the last couple of years, but we haven't been talking about the Federal Reserve. Hopefully we get back to that because people have noticed now the thing we call inflation. Like, we used to talk about taxation and stuff. Well, I've been trying to change that. I'll give you my new one. Inflation is theft. That is where it's at. You want to know how we're getting screwed? Well, it's inflation is theft. And I actually can say now, after people go to the pump and they go to the store and all that kind of stuff, now they're finally starting to listen to us about the Federal Reserve. So, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities to talk about these things that you're talking about. And with the economy the way it is right now, we're starting to look like geniuses when it comes to stuff we didn't even talk about for the last couple of years. It's like, wait a minute, are you guys against the? Yeah, that's what we've been talking about for probably since the early 70s when we got off the gold standard. But people can see it now. So the point is, inflation is theft.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And
and this
it's,
is not the first point of inflation. We've had inflation ever since the end of the Great Depression. It's always been inflation ever since then. And the borrowed time that we've been on ever since the Federal Reserve was first enacted, we had 10, 15 years worth of real booming economy, and then the bottom fell out because now the actual assets, land, gold, stuff like that, goes into the centralized system. And then, well, now we're going to print this currency that says that, yes, this gets goods and resources. And when people think that, oh, well, the times that we've had, a great economic boom, these are all falsies or fallacies in my opinion. They're just falsehoods because it's based on an idea that money comes from thin air. It comes out of this entity that everybody trusts is good, when it's just all a load of BS. And they're talking about, well, we spend billions of dollars on this. Well, if I can create money out of thin air, it's that's modern monetary theory. We'll just keep printing it. It's nothing anyway. It's just an exchange for goods and services. It really has no value because the idea behind it has no value. It's just ridiculousness. I'm trading you a piece of paper for another piece of paper. One has a face on it. The other has printed ones and zeros that says this is my receipt. And I guess it goes into human interaction. What really matters? People have been killing each other over tennis shoes and cars and all these, tangible things that are just useless. You know what I mean? And then people don't understand where their food comes from. I think this is an overabundance of convenience and programming on the people. But and again, this is about statism, and I'm not a big person on the state. I'm not a big person on centralized systems. I think they're all full of shit, to tell you the truth. I'm not a big person that's going to back them up, and I'm not going to sit here and have a conversation that's saying that, well, if we do this and this, we can minimize it by peeling it back. But yet again, you have to get people to be on board with that idea that these things are just really security systems to keep the system going. And that's really all they are. When you no longer believe in them, I think then you're truly free.
I agree, but I think we do have to engage in our community and take these offices because we can kind of sit around and just be, anarchists in our front yard or on the porch, but we really have to get involved so that we can take it back. I mean, the kind of the joke about being a libertarian is, we want to take over the world so we can give it back to you, and say you can do what you want. But we still have to do it because if we don't do it, they're going to take it away whether we like it or not. So all the things you're talking about, I mean, um, I've been closed. So I mean, just saying I don't care. I know I've literally been closed. I mean, in fact, they get warrants to come in and do fire checks and all this stuff. I mean, they're all constantly people are telling me what to do, and after a while, I get sick of it. And especially if you own property, that's the big thing that they do in Wisconsin. They try to nail you on everything with that. And a lot of people don't own. Very few people actually own property. They talk about property, but they don't own it because if you owe a bank, you don't own property.
Well, right.
And
If you actually have the deed in your hand, most people don't own their own vehicles anymore. They just replace payments depending on when they trade their vehicle in. They no longer they're slaves to their payments.
yeah,
I don't own property. I never wanted to own property. It's not something that I think is a benefit to my life when the government can come in and take my property regardless if I own it or not. They can say that, well, this area is perfect for a road. We don't have to pay you for your property. We're just going to commandeer it, say, see you later, have a nice day, build my road, or do whatever they want. And that's about it. I mean, the government is basically just this big bully that everybody says, well, okay, well, the thought process, especially when I was growing up, was that you can't fight the government; they're too big. Well, if you say that enough times, people start believing that. And I think we have about 60, 70 years of people believing that because they were complacent because, oh, we got fed. We were okay. We had a roof over our head. We didn't have to dig in the street or dig a hole, and then I'm going to sleep there for the night and then move on to the next. I don't know where my meals are coming from, and that comes out of the Great Depression, where people were so oppressed and they didn't have anything, and when they thought they had something, it was all taken away. So this all bears back to what I'm talking about basic human survival. That people do not have the skill sets to do this anymore. They just don't. You talk to the youth today, and if you were to take the phone out of their hand, their parents don't even know how to control them. So, I mean, this is something that has been a perpetual thing for many generations. And until we get to that root cause, I mean, you can build a foundation on real solid ground, or you can build a foundation based on the ideas that the state implemented over the course of your lifetime. And this is where the statist idea comes in, because it's still based off the structure of the state. And as a libertarian, I would say that repealing stuff is great, but I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean you said a mouthful there, but we got a lot of work ahead of us on that. And I guess what I'm saying is, if we don't get involved, we're not going to be able to get anything towards being closer to being libertarian. They're going to drive the bus whether we get on it or not, and it's going to be flying right through, like you said, your front yard, and they're going to put a road through it. So there's an old saying. I think it's, if you don't have a seat at the table, then you're on the menu. And I don't want to be on the menu anymore. I don't know about you, but we've been on the menu for a little too long. You said 7 years. Well, it's been at least that long. But it seems like over the last 2 years or even 10 years, we've been on a sharp decline. We're on the menu. So it's time to get a seat at the table.
You ever hear the expression, if I don't have a seat at the table, I'll just build another damn table?
Well, that's a good one. I mean, I've heard a lot of different things like that, adages, but I mean, the one that I guess stuck with me is, I don't want to be on the menu. I don't know about you. I don't think if we don't have a seat, we're going to just say, hey, we're the thing that's on the menu. We're going to do something about it. We're not going to be on the menu much longer.
I don't think
So,
I'd ever say that I would be on the menu, because I'm not going to accept a predetermined outcome just because somebody else wants that to happen. Regardless if it's the government or your friend down the road or the customer that's not paying you or whatever. The thing is that's just a different mentality. Now, as far as modern groupthink and stuff like that, I think that's a statist idea. I mean, I think libertarianism is a good philosophical idea. I, I don't think there's a lot of applications in some of the politics, because when you talk about nonviolent uh, aggression or anything like that, or you talk about uh,
NAP.
well, it's not really, according to Karen Ann Harlos, it's not NAP. It's a nonviolent. Um, I can't remember exactly what she says, but it's been uh, adjusted to a popular idea of the NAP. It, it's not actually a documented term in the Libertarian Party as far as any of the documents, according to Karen Ann Harlos. But it's uh, it's something that, so if you don't want to hurt people, you don't want to take their stuff, that's a pretty good idea. If you have mutual benefit, it's a pretty good idea. Um, when it comes to public policy, and people do not have their own security because they have become dependent on the state or something like that, this is just a mindset that has to be changed within individuals that do depend on the state or the structure of the state. But yet again, where do people derive their own security? I don't know. As far as like a human interaction of violent sense, if I had to use my hands in self-defense, I've developed those skill sets. If I had to take care of my own house or my own plumbing or any of that, develop those skill sets. If I wanted to take care of my own vehicle, it doesn't matter if it's gas or diesel, I develop those skill sets. Um, if you want to be able to run 10 miles in a certain time period, you develop your body to develop those skill sets. These are just depending on how much work you want to put into the pot of your own individual self. And I think a lot of people take a lot of shortcuts. And the path of least resistance is a very tempting path, but I think the people that actually get out there and go get stuff done do it the hard way, and that's just because they know. Um, I wish you well in your bid for sheriff. I think that if you were to implement some libertarian ideas, probably be a good thing. Um, I'm not a big groupthink person. I think that trying to dictate what is and what isn't, as far as political ideology and stuff like that. I think that's why there's a broad spectrum to libertarianism. I grew up as a Democrat that developed into a conservative that went back more moderate, but that's just because I don't rely on a lot of people as far as trying to get goods and services.
Well, I'll tell you what. We've been talking about an hour. I'm gonna about hit the hay, and I really appreciate being on your show. And let's do this again. And I wouldn't even mind a forum like this. I know you and I talked about it, but it'd be cool if you had some kind of debates on here or something. I mean, even with some of these candidates, and it'd be interesting to kind of hear some of the different discourse, because a lot of what happens these days is they just talk to like people like yourself, but they don't talk against each other or try to debate anything. All they do is just sort of say what's on their mind or what they're talking to people, what their constituent or their supporters want them to talk about, but they don't actually engage in any discourse. I mean, there's no argument, there's no debate. It just sounds like, I don't know, they're just all just talking, and nobody's like competing with each other. And
Well, it all depends on if people agree with each other, if they don't. But then you get into the little nuances. But yeah, if you want to be on here again, I
all
have
right,
no problem. I give everybody a voice if they want it.
all
I've
right,
invited many Republicans, many Democrats, many liberals, many Democratic socialists. But yet again, people don't want to hear the hard things as far as what challenges their mind. Everybody wants to be reinforced as far as their and this is the problem with groupthink. I think is that everybody's trying to reinforce. If you ask questions or try and be outside the box, a lot of people just are like, "Oh, well, then you're over here or you're over there," just because that's what develops a security in their own mind and puts themselves back into this box of security. So
yeah,
it's trying to break through those barricades, man.
all right,
All right, Scott.
all right.
Have a good
Thanks a
evening.
lot. You have a
Take it
good
easy.
evening.
Good luck in your campaign, man.
All right, thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it very much.
Scott
Have a good
Noble
one.
for Sheriff, Portage County.
All right, thank you.
All right, Scott is gone. I appreciate him being on the podcast. Scott and I have fired back at each other about some stuff on Facebook. I think there is a little bit where people are trying to get more of their own initiative in than the party initiative. But this is something that's, you know, going to be about what is best for me or what is best for thee. I think the Libertarian Party is more about thee than I. I think that being a person that likes to help others, but I'm not going to do it because they can't help themselves. I'm gonna do it because they can't help themselves, but I'm gonna do it because of those people that can't help themselves are usually the ones that want to help themselves. The people that don't want to help themselves, I'm not out here, going out and saying, well, yeah, well, I'm going to help you every single day, and then there's going to be a lot of, you know, hate because, hey, man, I've been helping you out, or hey, I've been helping you out, and you're not doing anything for yourself. Eventually you just, that's dead weight. You just cut it loose. If you're an American or you live in the United States and you're part of that dead weight system, I mean, there's gonna be hard times coming. I mean, I don't have to go to the grocery store to get my food. I don't have to do any of that. It's a choice. So when it really comes down to it, do I need a tag for this turkey because the DNR says so? No, I'm hungry. I'm gonna go eat. So I mean, it all goes down to your personal choice of what convenience or what sacrifices you're going to make for your own individual outcome in life. Now, as far as the group think that's going on, where you have to think this way in one subject or another, I'm sorry, but that's just not the way life is. You know, you are an individual. You have your own right to think the way that you want to, but just don't think that anybody's going to jump on that bandwagon with you. Now, if you agree on certain items and not on others, fine. That's an individual. You have the right to all these things. I mean, those are human inalienable rights. The state can't tell you that. And I think we've been complacent in this. Like I said, statists are individuals that are an advocate of a political system in which the state has the substantial centralized control over social and economic affairs. So if you're advocating for less taxes than a zero tax, you can be considered a statist. If you're thinking that the structure of the system should stay intact the way that it is, you can be considered a statist. I've invited some other people onto this show. We'll see if they come in or not. But we were going for about an hour. I haven't seen them come in yet. I don't think that my random thoughts on my brain really communicate with a lot of people well, but I'm a lunatic. I'm not supposed to communicate well with people. I'm just supposed to speak my mind and people can take it as they see it. And that's the way I look at it. So, as far as the lunatic libertarian is concerned, I'm not a statist. I think that people need to understand that you need to have skills. You need to develop those skills through wisdom, which is through failure, to make sure that you have the security in yourself to make sure that your life continues on with the next step and the next breath. For everybody out there, I'm a lunatic libertarian. Peace, and y'all be free.